Hello, this is Jock and coach of the San Francisco Cinderace. Today I'm going to be going over a tier list of our A tiers for the Season 3 of the SCL. Now, I'll be going over like why each Pokemon is where it is, but this is a tier list of what me, with a little help from Makeda and Hollow Kid, believe to be the best A tiers that are available. So this isn't saying that you should be picking these Pokemon first in the draft. I still think you should take an S or G Max as your first pick, but if you get to when you're supposed to pick your A and some of these are still available, I would say you should probably be looking at maybe the top 20 or so A tiers. That's not to say that anything towards the bottom is bad. If one of these fits into your team better than something in the top, you should definitely pick it. But if you're not sure what to take, I would suggest looking at something up towards this section of the tier list. Now, with that said, these are ranked in terms of how valuable to a team they would be in a vacuum. If this was the only Pokemon you got to pick, these would be probably the best choices towards the top and towards the bottom. These aren't bad choices, but they definitely have their drawbacks, whereas some of the things up towards the top are more well-rounded and can fit on a lot more teams easily. So with that said, we're going to get into number 1, Volcarona. Now, Volcarona came out in Generation 5, has been in OU or Borderline every generation since. It's got a very good typing in Bug and Fire with a very nice stat spread. So we have a good 135 special attack that helps it be a very capable wall breaker. Base 100 speed lets it outspeed a lot of threats. 105 special defense is also very good, and 85 HP is quite respectable. The attack isn't great, but it doesn't have a lot of physical moves you want to be using anyways. And the defense, it's not even its lowest stat, but it is pretty frail on the physical side. So, Bug Fire, like I said, very interesting typing, very good offensively. Defensively, you only have 3 weaknesses with a couple key resistances, with a 4 times to Grass, and you resist the common typings of Steel and Fairy. So you are able to switch in on things like that. And moves-wise, Volcarona gets access to some of the best sweeping options in the game here. So Quiver Dance, I believe it was its signature move when it came out, but there's other stuff to get it now. If this doesn't load here. So it doesn't look like it. But Quiver Dance, the way it works, it's just like Sword Stance or Nasty Plot, but instead of raising just one stat, it raises your speed, your special attack, and your special defense all by 1 every time you use it. So not only are you getting your big sort of offensive stats, you also get your special defense. So say you switch this in on a common fairy type like Clefable, right? Clefable doesn't get a lot of moves that want to hit Volcarona. It resists its main stab in Moonblast, and if it gets a Quiver Dance or 2 off, its special defense is going to be so boosted that Clefable doesn't have a good way to deal with it anymore. So if you can get 1 to 2 Quiver Dances off, Volcarona is capable of sweeping through an entire team on its own. Now, one of its only sort of drawbacks is it doesn't have a ton of special coverage, but the special coverage it does have, it's all quite good. So you have a lot of options on the fire side of things. You have Heat Wave, Flamethrower, Fire Blast. Another unique move, it gets Fiery Dance, my personal favorites. Fiery Dance is 10 less power than Flamethrower with 100% accuracy, but its secondary effect has a 50% chance to raise your special attack by 1. So you basically have a coin flip, and you still get to do close to Flamethrower's damage. And if you get, say, 2 lucky boosts off Fiery Dance, you can sweep through a game with that on its own. But other than Fire, it gets Hurricane for flying coverage, it gets Giga Drain for grass coverage, and then I believe it's down here as a TR, yes, it gets Psychic as well. But that's the extent of its special coverage. It does get some other interesting things, like how we talked about it being base 85. There are bulky Volcarona sets that aren't a sweeper that run Roost. It gets Roost as a move. So you could run, say, Quiver Dance, Roost, and then Fiery Blast and Bug Buzz being its other big stab. Excuse me. And you're able to take a lot of hits. Now, the biggest thing Volcarona suffers from, thanks to Bug and Fire being its typing, it would take half of its HP on switching from Stealth Rock. So you either need to be willing to bring heavy-duty boots all the time, or you need to be able to support it with Defog and Rapid Spin support. It does get Defog itself, but it doesn't want to have to run that because if you're already running heavy-duty boots, then you shouldn't be putting defog on Volcarona. And excuse me, I've lost my train of thought there. If you have rapid spin support, though, it frees up the item slot that you could put something like leftovers for the bulky Volcaronas, or perhaps you could put an expert belt, a pinch berry, or a life orb on a sweeper Volcarona. So definitely one of the best A tier options. It's going to be capable of sweeping through teams on its own, very nice well-rounded stats, and a good offensive typing. Up next, we have a fairy type, Togekiss. Now, Togekiss, I believe it got drafted last season, but getting into its stats, same HP as Volcarona, so it can be a bulky set. 120 special attack, also respectable, but this has a lot better defensive stats. 115 special, 95 physical, a little slower at 80 defense. And the flying typing does give it a couple more weaknesses to rock, electric, ice, and then it still has the poison and steel from being a fairy type. With that said, Togekiss gets a very strong ability in Serene Grace. So secondary effect chances are doubled. So like how I said on Volcarona, Fiery Dance had a 50% chance. If Volcarona got Serene Grace, it would be 100. Togekiss has a couple moves that it can take advantage of that on. The classic sort of combo is use Thunder Wave. I believe Thunder Wave has a 30% chance that once you've paralyzed the opponent, they don't get to move on their turn. It just says the opponent was paralyzed and their Pokemon doesn't get to do anything. If you combo that with Air Slash, which has a 30% chance to flinch, it works out to be like a 40% chance that they can't do anything normally, but because Togekiss has Serene Grace, it's actually a 60% chance to flinch. So when you put the two of these together, I believe it's close to like a 60 or 65% chance that the opponent doesn't get to do anything. So if you can pull this off and they don't want to switch, there's a good chance you can just lock them in and flinch them 2 or 3 times consecutively and kill them off. The other big one is Ancient Power that Serene Grace takes advantage of. Ancient Power has a 10% chance to raise all of your stats, except for Evasion, by 1. So with Serene Grace, it's a 20% chance, so it's still not great, but I've seen Togekisses pull it off and sweep through teams thanks to it, so it still gets good coverage otherwise, with Aura Sphere being a big option. Fighting coverage is always nice. Try attack on the normal side of things, and I believe it gets more grass than just Solar Beam, but I could be wrong. It does get Flamethrower, Heat Wave, Shadow Ball. Okay, so it gets Grass Knot, that's what it was. And then you have Dazzling Gleam for your fairy coverage, as well as you get Psyshock, and I was going to say, I think Psychic too. So there's a couple sets you could run. You could run Calm Mind substitute sets, you can run Thunder Wave, Air Slash sets, or you could just run, it makes a very capable Choice Scarf with 80 speed. So you put a Choice Scarf and run for physical moves. You could even run a Nasty Plot set. So Togekiss is very versatile, and being a fairy type, it's one of the best offensive types in the game. So it's capable of doing a lot of things for you. And now that Pokemon Home is back, it gets Roost, so it could even run its sort of bulky substitute sets again that I was talking about earlier. So a very threatening sweeper that if you don't have something that resists its Air Slash, you're going to have trouble dealing with. Now we get on to a new thing that did not get drafted last season, because its hidden ability hadn't been released yet. So for those of you that don't know, Rillaboom just recently got its hidden ability, Grassy Surge. So on the Switch, Rillaboom is going to get Grassy Terrain setup. Now if you don't know how terrains work, there's 4 of them: Grassy, Misty, Electric, and Psychic. Each one corresponds to a type and boosts that type's move. So Grassy Terrain makes grass moves stronger, and it gives the same amount as leftovers, 1/16 of your HP back per turn to anything that's grounded. Levitate users don't get it, Air Balloon users don't get it, and Flying types don't get it. But anything else would get the regeneration from Grassy Surge. So Rillaboom gets a very strong ability in Grassy Surge. Good base HP, very nice at base 100, that's rare to see. The only other thing that immediately comes to mind is a Azumarill, which is an S2. Base 125 attack is very nice on a wall breaker type Pokemon. Base 90 defense is very high, all things considered. Special attack is 60, not great, but you're probably going to use him physical most of the time anyways. 70 special defense isn't great, but isn't terrible either. And base 85 defense is not the slowest thing in the world, but it's not going to outspeed everything on the same hand. So, being a grass type, he has okay typing. He's going to be weak to a couple things, but it's a good offensive typing, and it resists ground, which is a notable offensive type. The big thing here with grassy terrain, it boosts the strength of grass moves, and Rillaboom gets Woodhammer. So a choice-banded Woodhammer Rillaboom is really strong. We're talking almost on Dracovish level. So Woodhammer is base 120 power, and it does recoil damage, but you have the Grassy Surge to help you regain some of that. So base 120, plus the Choice Band, which gets you to, what would that be, 180. And then you get the Grassy Terrain boost, which puts you at about 210, 220, and that's without stab. So you're going to be about 260 on a Woodhammer with Choice Band. It's going to be absolutely monstrous if you can pull that off. And it gets a good supporting move pool as well. It's got its main grass coverages. It can be your taunt user if you want to use taunt. It gets knockoff. It gets U-turn. It gets good ground coverage. Excuse me. It gets Earthquake, but you don't actually want to run Earthquake because Grassy Terrain cuts Earthquake's damage in half. Instead, you want to run High Horsepower because it's 5 power less than Earthquake and doesn't get lowered by Grassy Terrain. So if you want to run it, High Horsepower is the way to go. It gets fighting coverage in Superpower, Bulk Up. I think it gets Drain Punches. Yeah, Drain Punch. Some Dark coverage. And then that's about it. So it's not amazing physical coverage, but it does have a good variety, as well as it gets Swords Dance and Sub if you wanted to run that type of set, Bulk Up as well. So Rillaboom is one of the best A tiers that's going to fit on a lot of teams, because a lot of things want the Grassy Terrain. If you have an offensive team that doesn't want to take a lot of damage, Grassy Terrain helps you heal up slowly over time. If you have a defensive team that wants to stay in and wall things, the Grassy Terrain is going to help you keep your Pokemon healthy. And that's without taking into account that you get Rillaboom on top of that. So definitely one of the strongest A tiers available. Up next, we have another grass type in Tangrowth. Now, Tangrowth is new this season, but has been a classic for a long time. It gets Chlorophyll and Leaf Guard, which are okay abilities. Chlorophyll, if you're running a Sun team, can help, but base 50 speed doubled, you're only at 100, which isn't amazing for a Chlorophyll user. But we have Regenerator, one of the strongest abilities in singles. And then look at the base stats. Ooh, base 100 at least, and 4 stats is very nice, with the only low ones being Special Defense and Speed. But since Tangrowth is kind of a wall, you don't want him to be fast anyways, so the main drawback is the Special Defense being somewhat low. But with that said, your wall having a base 100 attack is very nice. So, if you don't know how Regenerator works, you get 33% of your health back for free every time you switch in. So if you draft 2 of these, the most prominent being Toxapex and Tangrowth, and you swap between them, you could just get free health forever, theoretically. It doesn't usually work that way because you're usually taking damage on the switch, but it helps mitigate that and keep things healthy. Typing, same as Rillaboom, a couple of weaknesses with a big ground immunity, or not immunity, resistance being one of them. Gets respectable coverage on physical and special attack, so it can be run either way. It gets things like Knockoff, Power Whip, Earthquake for its physical coverage. It gets stuff like Giga Drain, and I believe Earth Power? I could be wrong. No Earth Power, but Sludge Bomb and Focus Blast are its big special moves. It also gets the classic grass move Leech Seed. You get some of your Stun Spores and Sleep Powder type moves. So this thing is a very annoying wall. They can perform a lot of roles, and it can even be a sweeper, because I think we get Swords Dance, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. Swords Dance. Yes, it gets Swords Dance, so it can be very threatening as a physical sweeper if you want to run it that way. I do think it's most commonly going to be used as your defensive wall, but if you throw an Assault Vest on there with 4 attacking moves, it can function quite well as both. So I think Tangrowth is definitely the best wall right off the bat if you want it. And it's a grass type, so it has a few weaknesses, but other than that, I think it's very solid. We have a favorite of the Jacksonville Jolteon coming up, Mamoswine. Now, Mamoswine got Knockoff back this generation, which doesn't sound like much, but missing out on it last generation did hurt it that it had slightly less coverage. With that said, it gets two good abilities in Oblivious and Thick Fat. Now, Oblivious was only immune to Taunted previous to this generation, but now it's immune to Intimidate, so it can't have its attack lowered by Intimidate users, which is very strong. And if you want to use him as a setup, or like a suicide lead stealth rocker, Oblivious makes sure that he can't be taunted and will get those rocks up no matter what. So Oblivious is very good. And Thick Fat, if we come over here, you can see Thick Fat gives him, it gets rid of his weakness to fire, and it gives him an ice resistance. So it helps him take hits slightly better if you give him Thick Fat. Now onto the stats. Base 110 HP is very nice. 130 attack makes him a strong wall breaker. Good defenses on both of them. 60 is acceptable, but not great. And 80 speed makes him one of the better Choice Scarf users. So his typing, Ice Ground, is very good offensively. He gets Earthquake and Icicle Crash being his big two stabs, but he also gets Ice Shard for priority. Choice Band or Life Orb Ice Shard is nothing to sneeze at. You can do 60 to 70% to a lot of the metagame with a Choice Banded Ice Shard, and 2 usually kills most things. On top of that, he gets Stone Edge, Knockoff, Superpower. I feel like I'm missing something here. No, that's about it. Yeah, so a little bit shallow on the physical coverage, but he does get good supporting moves. I believe he gets Taunt. No Taunt. But he gets Stealth Rocks. So that's another big reason to draft him, is Stealth Rocks on top of it. But mainly the set a lot of people run would be EQ, Icicle Crash, Ice Shard, Stone Edge. So that's sort of your core Mamoswine set. I think he gets Sword Stance as well. Looking here. No. Interesting. Yeah, no. So it doesn't get set up himself, but like I said, he runs a Choice Band a lot of the time. So if you want a good wall breaker and you're willing to put a Choice Band or Life Orb on there, he'll kill a lot of things for you. So after him, we have Blastoise. Now Blastoise is new to our draft league, and we don't have Mega Blastoise. That's something to keep in mind. We are not using Megas. That said, regular Blastoise is still very threatening. He has very good defenses, acceptable HP, and can be run either physical or special. With the new moves that came out in Isle of Armor, Blastoise gets the new Flip Turn, I believe. Yes, Flip Turn. If you don't know how Flip Turn works, it's Water type U-turn. So you deal damage, and then you get to switch out into something else. And thanks to Blastoise's somewhat slow speed, there's some things Blastoise can be a slow pivot on, where you can take the damage with Blastoise's good defenses and bring in something that's sort of frail, like maybe the Volcarona type Pokemon that are wall breakers but don't want to take the damage. You can bring those in thanks to Blastoise being slow. Being straight water type, Blastoise only has 2 weaknesses and some important resistances to fire and steel. Abilities aren't great. Rain Dish is only useful if you plan on setting up the rain, and Torrent is helpful but requires you to be at 33% or lower health. So you should be running Torrent most of the time, but it's not going to do much outside of a few situations. Coverage-wise, Blastoise gets the Gen 1 treatment, as I call it, and has picked up lots of nice additions over the years. The big stuff being a Flash Cannon, Aura Sphere, Dragon Pulse, Dark Pulse, Ice Beam. What else? There's something I'm missing. Focus Blast, but you should be running Aura Sphere more anyways because it doesn't miss. But otherwise, as physical, you could run it with Rapid Spin, Crunch, Liquidation, Flip Turn, Earthquake. You got Rock Tomb. You got lots of things that you can put on there. So he's one of the interesting things that can be run either way. His biggest draw is right here, Shell Smash. Shell Smash raises your attack, speed, and special attack by 2. So that's equivalent to a Swords Dance or a Nasty Plot, as well as getting an agility at the same time. The downside is it lowers your defense and special defense by 1, which isn't the end of the world because you have pretty good defenses. So even if you don't want to run White Herb, which gets rid of stat drops, you could still be okay with Blastoise. So I've had a couple practice games I've been playing where a Shell Smash Blastoise can sweep through an entire team on its own. So that's why it's banned on the Gmax, if you were wondering, the Shell Smash. That said, Regular Blastoise is still going to be a very scary sweeper, and even if you don't plan on using him as a sweeper, he can function very well as your rapid spinner since he doesn't take much from Stealth Rocks, and he appreciates the speed boost it gives him to sweep through a team. So probably the best rapid spinner in A tier, I would say. Moving on, we have another wall breaker. Galarian Darmanitan's older cousin, regular Darmanitan. So, right off the bat, you might notice something's a little high there. 140 base attack is absolutely insane. Coupled with the fact that his most popular items are Choice Band and Life Orb, this thing is just focused on hitting things very hard. Base 95 speed helps him do that. Base 105 HP helps make up for the pretty bad defenses in 55 each. Don't even think about running him special with base 30 special attack. His ability Sheer Force, I think Makeda covered in his video, but just in case, any move with a secondary effect, the effect goes away and you get 1.3 times more damage. So that would be moves like Bite with the flinch chance, or Headbutt with the flinch chance, something with a burn chance, Fire Punch, or what's another good example here? Bulldoze with the speed drop. Those sort of things would go away, but they would do more damage. You could run Zen mode, which would then give you switching the attack, special attack, and getting better defenses. So that requires you to be under 50% HP. It can work, but honestly, picking up the psychic typing, kind of nice, but you pick up a lot more weaknesses too. Zen mode is viable, but definitely not as strong as Sheer Force. So I would say you'd be running Sheer Force with a Life Orb or Choice Band most of the time, sometimes a Choice Scarf, and he gets very nice physical coverage. Flare Blitz being his biggest sort of move that you click pretty frequently. Superpower if you want fighting coverage. He gets Earthquake, I believe. Yes, there we go, Earthquake. He gets Zen Headbutt, I know. Yep, Zen Headbutt, Iron Head. And Grass Knot's helpful if there's big fat water types like Quagsire or Seismitoad that want to switch into you. You can catch them on the switch with 8 Grass Knot. So very threatening as a wall breaker. The only thing that sort of holds him back is those low defenses. He's not going to take a lot of hits, and if Stealth Rocks get set up, he's going to be really in trouble because he needs all the HP he can get. But if you're pairing him with something like a Togekiss or another Cleric type Pokemon that can keep him healthy, he's going to do a lot of work for you. Next, we have Sylveon, another fairy, and one of the Clerics we were just talking about. Sylveon is, I know, very popular with a lot of people in the league. So if you're thinking about drafting it, it's going to have to be early. I had good success with it in Season 1. Its stats let it perform well in a number of roles. It can perform quite nicely as a special wall. Its base 65 defense isn't great, but if you invest 252 EVs into HP and defense, it can be a physical wall even. Pixelate being an amazing ability that turns all normal moves into fairy moves and gives them a boost. Means that Sylveon can function well offensively even with full HP and defenses invested. It doesn't need any points into its attack to do damage. 60 speed is the only thing that really holds it back as a sweeper, but as a wall it's not too worried about that. Just straight fairy typing means it only has 2 weaknesses and some important resistances and immunities to dark fighting and dragon. And moves wise, the offensive move pool is somewhat shallow. You get Hyper Voice as your main attacking move. That's down here, I believe. Yes. So even though it's normal, Pixelate turns it into a fairy move, so it'll be doing more damage than Dazzling Gleam then. You get Shadow Ball, you get Psyshock, and you get Mystical Fire, but that's the main extent of your special coverage. On the support type side, though, you're going to be getting Wish, Baton Pass, so that you can pass into something that wants to take the Wish. You're going to be getting Heal Bell back now that we're allowing home moves. You get Toxic back so that you can cripple other walls. You get Calm Mind, you get double screens. You can set up Misty Terrain if you want to set up Misty Terrain. So this thing is an amazing Cleric that's going to be able to do just about anything you want healing wise. It can, like I said, from screens to Heal Bell to Wish passing, it can do everything on the defensive end, and with Throat Spray, Calm Mind, Pixelate, Hyper Voice, you can sweep through teams. So this is a very effective dual threat. If you need a wall and you need a fairy and Togekiss is already taken, this is the way to go. Next up we have Mandibuzz. Now Mandibuzz, I was talking with Makeda, and we were sort of debating on whether or not it should be placed this high. I feel it's pretty solid. Makeda felt it was a little lower. It's not quite like Sylveon, how it's a good wall that can still be an offensive threat. As you can see, its attacking stats are very low, but outside of that, base 80 speed on a wall Pokemon is very strong, and then it gets base 95 special, base 105 physical, and base 110 HP. That's really good on a wall because you can invest it either way and they won't know which way is a wall for. On top of that, its dark flying typing only leaves it with 4 main weaknesses, 2 immunities, and a couple big resistances, the main one being Ghost. There's not a lot of good dark type walls that can resist Ghost out there, and Ghost is a big problem for a lot of teams. So if you're worried or you notice that a lot of the teams you're thinking about building have a Ghost weakness, Mandibuzz might be the way to go. Abilities wise, Big Pecs prevents your defense from being lowered. Overcoat protects you from weather damage and powder moves. So Sleep Powder, Poison Powder, Stun Spore, those type moves can't affect Mandibuzz. So if you expect like a Venusaur to be using Sleep Powder, then this is a good ability to bring. Weak Armor lowers your defense and raises your speed. There's an interesting combo I'll talk about in a moment with that, but most of the time Big Pecs is going to be the way to go so that your defenses aren't being dropped from a couple moves that have that as a 10 or 20% chance. So moves wise, it gets okay physical attacks, but like I said, it doesn't really have the stats to back it up. So the big 2 moves Mandibuzz is known for running is Knock Off and Foul Play. Knock Off is the classic sort of move that just gets rid of items. Foul Play is run because Foul Play deals damage using the opposing Pokemon's attacking stat. So say a Darmanitan switches in and you use Foul Play, you're using that Darmanitan's 140 base attack to deal the damage rather than Mandibuzz's base 60 attack. So it's really good when you know you're trying to wall something that's got crazy attack, might be running a Choice Band, that sort of thing. Now how I mentioned Weak Armor, Mandibuzz gets Lash Out as a new move from the Isle of Armor. The way Lash Out works is if any stat of yours has been dropped by whatever reason, you deal double the damage, so it turns into, what would that be, base 150 power, which is absurd. And Weak Armor, every time you take a physical hit, is going to lower your defense. So if you're up against something like a Darmanitan and you know you're going to take a hit, as long as you're slower, you let yourself get hit, you let Weak Armor proc, and then you use Lash Out, you can probably kill a couple things and catch them off guard that way. Otherwise, you're getting Toxic, you're getting Defog, you're getting a slow U-turn user, which can help bring in stuff safely. Like I said, a bulky Pokemon like this takes the hit and U-turns out, brings something else that's not as chonky in pretty safely. And then it's got okay special coverage if you want to run it that way because it gets Nasty Plot, so you could run like a Dark Pulse Heat Wave set if you wanted to. So it's nothing to scoff at offensively, but like I said, you're mainly going to be using a sort of, probably like, I would say Roost, Toxic, Defog, and then either Knock Off or Foul Play would be the common Mandibuzz set. But like I said, able to wall a lot of stuff, only really weak to Electric, Ice, Rock, and Fairy. So it can wall a lot of the metagame quite effectively. Next up we have another bird wall in Skarmory. Now Skarmory is a little bit different. Skarmory does have slightly better offensive stats to help it actually do some damage with its stab moves, but it has bonkers special defense, physical defense, 140. It's absolutely crazy, and with a steel flying type, look at that. You get resistances to steel, fairy, dragon, psychic, and grass, which are all common types this generation, and you're going to be immune to ground and poison. The only things you're weak to are electric and fire, and they're only 2 times weaknesses. So Skarmory is a very effective wall. He only suffers that he doesn't quite have some of the moves that a wall likes as their attacking moves, like how Mandibuzz has Foul Play, which does damage using someone else's attack, or Gyro Ball like on Ferrothorn that uses its slow speed to its advantage. Skarmory's just stuck using regular offensive moves. But that's not usually how you plan to bring him. He gets a lot of good supporting moves. He gets both, I believe, Stealth Rocks and Spikes. Yeah, there's Stealth Rocks, Spikes. Yes, so both Stealth Rocks and Spikes. He can set them both up on his own. He gets Roost, and defog, so he can clear rocks and spikes if you need him to. He gets toxic since he is from an older generation. And he gets access to body press now, which does damage using your defense stat instead of your attack stat. So that's probably the biggest pickup for him, is that he gets body press, because that's going to do a lot of damage if anything that doesn't like fighting comes in. So I would say like you're commonly going to be running him mainly a support defensive sort of style, but he gets swords dance, he gets agility. It is possible to pull off offensive scrim raids. I've seen it done. The most common set that would be 1 to 2 of the hazards, either rocks or spikes, sometimes both, with Whirlwind, Roost, and maybe Taunt or Brave Bird as the last slot. So a very capable wall that can heal himself and will set up hazards for you. Very capable at that as well. After him we have Primarina. Now Primarina is interesting. I debated on putting it higher, but it has a couple problems. So Liquid Voice seems like a good option, that all sound-based moves become water-type moves. It's very reminiscent of Pixelate and Hyper Voice on Sylveon. The trouble is it doesn't actually give them a boost, it just turns them into water-type moves. So yes, you could run Hyper Voice Primarina with Liquid Voice, but then why wouldn't you just run Surf with Torrent at that point, because it's the same thing, and you could be getting an ability that does more than just turning your Hyper Voice into water-type. So abilities are a little lackluster, but other than that, very good typing. Because it's water, it's not weak to steel. It's only going to be weak to poison, electric, grass, with some very nice resistances to dark dragon fighting, like a lot of the fairies have. Good stats: 80 HP, 126 special attack, 116 special defense. Speed is a little slow, but the set this commonly runs kind of makes up for that. Now, it's one of the rare fairies that gets Moonblast. It also gets Hydro Pump, Surf, Scald, the whole gamut of water-type special moves. It also picked up, I believe, Flip Turn. Yeah, it picked up Flip Turn and Misty Explosion. So you could be running either of those. But the main sort of set would be Substitute Calm Mind. With its really good special defense, if you can come in on something, say like a Volcarona that can't really touch you with either of its stabs, and set up a substitute and then get a Calm Mind or two, the game can pretty much be over. Thanks to your high special attack already, you're able to sweep through a lot of teams with the combo of Moonblast and Surf or Hydro Pump or whatever your choice of water stab might be, because there's not a lot of things that resist both. On top of that, it also gets Ice Beam, Shadow Ball, Psychic Coverage, Energy Ball even. I don't even know why it gets Energy Ball. It doesn't need that, it's already good enough. But its coverage really helps it be unpredictable. On top of that, Calm Mind, giving it the ability to boost through a lot of things, just makes it so scary that it's a lot like Volcarona. If you let it get out of hand, it's going to be a mess. So after Primarina, we have another fairy type. This one is a little more interesting, Mimikyu. So it's Ghost Fairy, which is a very unique typing. Now it gets rid of one of Fairy's big weaknesses in poison, so that it's neutral. And now you're only going to be weak to Fairy and Ghost. You get 3 immunities. You get immunities to Normal, Fighting, and Dragon. The Normal immunity, not great. There's not a lot of normal type moves running around. Fighting and Dragon is very nice. The resistance to Bug is very helpful too, but not all that commonly needed. The main draw of Mimikyu is its ability Disguise. It gets to take 1 hit. They changed the way it works, and I don't remember entirely, but I want to say you just take 1/10. So it's like a life orb that you'll go to 90% every time. So you get hit no matter what move it is. If it deals damage, something like Toxic isn't going to break your Disguise. So if you take damage from an Iron Head or you take damage from a Flare Blitz, it's only going to do 10% of your health guaranteed. I believe. Let me check. They might have changed it. It might be just a reduction. Doesn't say. Let's see if Cerebi has it, because this is a big thing. How much does it change? Causes 1/8. Okay, so 1/8 max hit point damage. And its stats are pretty good. Base 96 speed is a weird number that lets it outspeed anything like Darmanitan. At base 95, you can outspeed by 1. The base special defense is very surprisingly high for something that's pretty small. Base 90 attack isn't great, but it gets Swords Dance, and in combination with Disguise, you basically get a one-time use of a free turn, which lets you set up Swords Dance pretty consistently. And then from there, it has a move pool that lets it take advantage of the Swords Dance quite nicely. It gets Shadow Sneak for priority, and it's Stab. It gets Shadow Claw, Play Rough. There's a couple other moves, I think. Beat Up can be interesting if you have a team that's made for it. It gets Drain Punch to help keep it nice and healthy. Phantom Force if you want something stronger, but I think Shadow Claw is the better option a lot of the time. I'm trying to see here. Leech Life for bug coverage. But yeah, that's looking like that's about it. So coverage isn't great, but you're really wanting to bring Mimikyu in, set up a Swords Dance towards the end of the game, and then just Shadow Sneak everything to death. That's the main idea. But its typing and ability allow it to function as a semi-defensive option sometimes, that you can bring it in if you have to, burn the Disguise, and maybe force something out, get your Swords Dance off, and then maybe pick up a kill from there. So even though its stats aren't great, and it's only base 476, it has a very nice ability and a good typing to help keep it quite viable. So next we have another interesting thing that's back, Magnezone. Now Magnezone is a very good typing, Electric Steel, that has very good stats to back it up. 115 defense, base 90 special defense. The only thing that's a little low HP, isn't amazing, but isn't terrible either. And special attack at 130 is very good, makes him an effective wall breaker. If you run him with Analytic, it gives him 1.3 times boost if he's the last Pokemon to move. So if you know you're going to be slower than something and you need that little extra damage, Analytic's the way to go. Most of the time you're going to be running Magnet Pull, most likely. If you switch in on a Steel type, say you switch in on Skarmory. Skarmory cannot leave unless it's got a Shed Shell as its item. It's stuck. They literally cannot switch out. The game prevents them from doing so. So it's a good way to trap things that are Steel and weak to electric moves and guarantee a kill. With that said, Magnezone's biggest problem is its coverage. It gets a lot of electric coverage, it gets a lot of Steel coverage, and then I think the only other special move it gets is Tri-Attack. So other than electric and Steel, you're not going to be able to do much. Hidden Power going away really hurt Magnezone, because it used to be that, oh, I know I'm going up against, say, like another Magnezone, right? That's weak to ground 4 times. I can run Hidden Power ground and I can kill the Magnezone. That was the idea, but now with Hidden Power gone, you're only stuck with Thunderbolt as your main option or Flash Cannon as your main option. So while he has uses, he is definitely not as strong as he was. If we still had Hidden Power, Magnezone would probably be second or third best A tier in the game. Moving on to Lucario, another Steel type. Lucario is interesting. Lucario has very good attacking stats and a good speed stat at 90, with very strong typing, only weak to ground fighting and fire. Lucario also gets Inner Focus, which prevents it from flinching and doesn't get an attack drop from tongue-tied there. Does not get the attack drop from Intimidate. I don't know why I'm stumbling over that. Justified as its hidden ability is very nice because Justified raises its attack if it gets hit by a dark move. So say you have something that's weak to dark like a Mimikyu or some other ghost type that doesn't want to take that hit, you bring in your Lucario, which resists dark, and it gets an attack boost. It can let it sweep through a team. So Lucario being able to run physical or special, I think is very valuable. It makes it a lot harder to wall it. So say you want to bring in, say, your Mandibuzz to wall Lucario, right? You don't know if the Lucario is going to be physical or special, so you can't put all of your EVs on the Mandibuzz into one or the other. They have to try and guess which one you're going to bring. And it gets the coverage to back it up, surprisingly. So he's got very good physical coverage. He gets, it's not Meteor Mash, it's Iron Head, I believe, on physical Steel. He gets the whole sort of spectrum of fighting moves from Drain Punch, Close Combat, Power Up Punch, all of the classic ones. He gets Swords Dance for boosting on physical, Extreme Speed for priority. I don't know. Yeah, he even gets Earthquake. I was gonna say, I don't know if he gets it or not. Poison Jab helps him deal with fairy types, even though you have Steel coverage. Some of them aren't weak to Steel. and Stone Edge Zen Headbutt can be helpful as well. On the special side of things, you've got Shadow Ball, you've got Dragon Pulse, you've got Dark Pulse, Aura Sphere, Flash Cannon, and you get Calm Mind Nasty Plot. So, the big one though is Vacuum Wave. There's not a lot of viable Pokemon that get priority special moves, the only real one being Vacuum Wave. And since Lucario gets Vacuum Wave, gets Nasty Plot, and its Stab, if you get a Nasty Plot off and you're able to just have everything slightly weakened, you can just clean up a team with Vacuum Wave. It's not even funny. If you can set up everything properly for this Pokemon, it can sweep through teams on its own. It's close to Volcarona. Its only main problem being its big weakness to ground and fighting, which are two of the most common sort of offensive types in the game. But other than that, it's an amazing Pokemon that's going to do a lot of work for you. Next up, we have Mr. Gengar. Now, he's available as a G-Max 2, so if he gets taken, you could still get him that way. Now, HP, not great. Attack, not even usable. Defense, pretty bad, but special attack at 130 makes him a very good wall breaker. 110 speed lets him outspeed most of the metagame outside of stuff like Inteleon, Cinderace, those sort of very fast things. Good typing. He unfortunately lost access to Levitate, I believe Gen 7, so he's weak to ground, but he still has some important resistances. Immune to fighting, resistant to fairy, and then the grass resistance is nice too. Big weakness to dark and ground kind of sucks, but not the end of the world on a Pokemon like this. Again, the Gen 1 effect. He has a lot of good coverage moves he's picked up over the years. You've got your main stabs in Shadow Ball and Sludge Bomb. You also get Giga Drain, Thunderbolt, Psychic, Dazzling Gleam. You get a lot of stuff that just kind of makes you go like, why does Gengar get that sort of stuff? So he has a lot of good stuff. I believe he picked up Nasty Plot just recently to help him punch through teams a little faster. But you also have Taunt, Encore, and Trick if you want to use him as a more supportive Pokemon. That's an option as well. So overall, Gengar very fast and can be a very effective wall breaker. The main things holding him back are sort of his HP and defense, very frail. So you have to be careful about him. He's one of the things like how I talked about Mandibuzz pivoting or Blastoise pivoting and bringing in a wall breaker. This is the sort of thing I was talking about. If you have a team with some good U-turn users, Gengar will do very nicely for you. Alakazam. So Alakazam is very similar to Gengar stats-wise. They both are very fast and can do a lot of damage and have weak physical stats. So this Alakazam's even faster at base 120 with a little higher special attack at 135. Defensively, he only resists fighting and psychic. He's not wanting to take a lot of hits anyway, so you shouldn't be counting on him for that. Weak to Bug, Ghost, and Dark. He gets 3 abilities. 2 of them are pretty good. Synchronize is good. If you get status, it copies the status and gives it to your opponent. So if you get toxic, they get toxic too. It doesn't work on steel types if they toxic you, or it doesn't work on electric types if they paralyzed you, that sort of thing. But it's a helpful ability in some situations, but most of the time you're going to be running Magic Guard. Protects the Pokemon from indirect damage. So the big reason to run this is that a Life Orb takes some of your HP every time you do damage in exchange for giving you a 30% boost. If you have Magic Guard, the Life Orb doesn't take any of your health, so you just get a free 30% boost to your already crazy special moves. And again, the Gen 1 effect has a lot of coverage that makes you kind of scratch your head. He's got his main stab in Psychic or Psyshock. He gets Calm Mind to help him set up. He gets, let's take a look here, Energy Ball, Shadow Ball, Dazzling Gleam, and there's one I'm missing. I'm not remembering it, but those are the big ones. He also gets access to Recovered. Oh, Tri-Attack, there we go. Recovered Substitute is a nice combination if you want to run that. Gets access to Trick, just like Gengar. Oh, Focus Blast, that was it. Focus Blast, there we go. Gets access to the Nasty Plot if you just want to go straight for the attack rather than a Calm Mind. So, gets access to a lot of things that make him very threatening as a sweeper. But again, if he's taking any hits, he's going to go down pretty quickly. So you're going to have to support him properly. We're kind of getting into that area that a lot of the things from here on out are solid, but are going to require a little more work to be as effective as some of the stuff in, say, like the top 14 and up, probably. So next up is Crawdaunt. Now, Crawdaunt is a personal favorite of mine. I've always liked Crawdaunt, but he is not without his faults. Good attack in 120 with a good defense at 85, and a usable special attack, which is surprising. Very slow and very bad special defense with a pretty poor HP stat as well, make him effectively frail. Even though he has a good defense, the HP sort of makes it so that even though he has a good defense, he doesn't want to take too many physical hits, doesn't really want to take any special hits. The typing isn't the best, weak to a lot of common things in fairy, fighting, electric, and grass. Some nice resistances to fire, dark, ghost, and steel, but like I said, he doesn't want to take a lot of hits. So abilities wise, there's only one you should be running. That's adaptability. Adaptability, so same type attack bonus. I can't remember if Makeda went over it, but basically moves that are the same type as your Pokemon do extra damage. And usually it's 1.5 times. So if you used Surf, instead of being 90 power, it would be closer to 130 power. If you use Knockoff, instead of being 65 power, it's closer to 90 power. What adaptability does, instead of 1.5, it doubles the bonus. So instead of being a 90 power Surf that goes up to about 120 or 130, it goes up to a 180 power Surf. So the big reason that's good on Crawdaunt, he gets Aqua Jet. Where's that one at? Aqua Jet, base of 40 power, but thanks to adaptability, it's a base 80 power priority move. So Aqua Jet Crawdaunt can clean up a lot of teams if they've been weakened slightly. Like for, say, I want to say Makeda had a replay last season where he got like 3 or 4 kills with his Conkeldurr and Mach Punch because everything had been lowered to like 30 or 40%. It's the same sort of deal with Crawdaunt. If you can chip the opponent down over time and still keep Crawdaunt alive, you bring him in and you just keep using Aqua Jet and you can pick up all of the kills with Crawdaunt. That said, he can also get Knockoff for his main Dark Stab. He usually runs Crab Hammer and Aqua Jet, so that if he wants to use excuse me, if he wants to use a more damaging move, like he needs to break through a wall, he has a better option. So Crab Hammer would be a base 200 power move with a higher chance to crit. So Crab Hammer is pretty crazy on its own, but he also gets access to, where is it here, Dragon Dance, and he just got Close Combat. So with Dragon Dance, it sort of helps to shore up his pretty bad speed, that if you invest max speed and you can get a Dragon Dance off, he can actually sweep through some teams without the need of Aqua Jet. So he's a good sweeper, but he really appreciates screens, or he wants you to have chipped down the opponent's team so that you can come in and Aqua Jet a lot of things. So, like I said, a lot of the things from here on out are going to be similar to this, that they're good, but they're going to require some setup from the rest of your team to do the maximum possible work. Up next we have Melodic. Makeda convinced me that this was a little higher than what I had originally, and I agree with him. I do think it's better than what I had thought. It's got a lot of good abilities. Marvel Scale, Competitive, and Cute Charm are all decent. Marvel Scale and Competitive definitely being the better of the two. So Competitive, whenever any stat of Milotic gets lowered by the opponent, it's going to raise its special attack. So if you can switch in Milotic on an Intimidate user, then it's going to boost its special attack. If you run Marvel Scale, it ups your defense anytime you get status. So if you switch Milotic in on a Toxic, it doesn't actually mind because it's going to get a defense boost. So as you can see, getting a defense boost makes this thing a pretty bonkers wall. 125 base special defense with base 95 HP, and then getting your defense up to about 100, a little over that. Once you get your Marvel Scale off, makes this thing really hard to break through, especially because it only has 2 weaknesses. And then it has base 100 special attack. So you get your Marvel Scale or your Competitive off and you have HP investment. This thing can function as a wall or as a sweeper. It gets Substitute, I believe it gets Calm Mind. Let's see. Calm Mind. No, it does not. So scratch that then. But Does it get anything that helps it set up? I mean, it gets Dragon Dance if you want to run it physical, but it doesn't really want to be run physical. So no way to really set up on the special side of things, but you have competitive as an option if you really want to do it. Special coverage, though, is pretty good. You get Dragon Pulse, Ice Beam, your same sort of water moves most of them get in Scald, Surf, Hydro Pump, Brine, all of those ones. There's one I'm forgetting here again. What is it? I'm drawing a blank. But a big one it gets is Recover. That's what helps it, Recover. That's what helps it function as a wall thanks to its good stats, and it still has respectable speed for something that can be a wall. So if you can get off your Marvel skill or competitive, and you have, say, a good set would be like Toxic, Recover, Ice Beam, Scald, you can still sweep through a team with a pretty defensive set like that thanks to its good abilities. So I think it's pretty respectable as a water type, but it sort of struggles from the problem that it's not quite focused either way. It's good at both attack and defense, whereas if you had, say, like a 135 special defense or a little higher special attack and it was more specialized, I would like it a little more, but on a defensive sort of team, I think Milotic could really shine. After we have Starmie. So Starmie is another rapid spinner. The only problem with Starmie as a rapid spinner is a low base HP. It doesn't want to be taking the Stealth Rock's damage too much on its own. I personally like using Starmie more as an offensive threat. It gets Natural Cure and Analytic, which help. Natural Cure gets rid of any status when it switches out. Analytic gives it more power if the Pokemon moves last. Now the problem with that, it's got base 115, so it's not really a problem because you're going to outspeed a lot of the Pokemon, but it kind of crosses out Analytic as an ability, and Illuminate does literally nothing in competitive. It only changes the amount of wild Pokemon you would encounter in the game. And since there's no wild Pokemon, you really only want to be using Natural Cure. So it struggles because it doesn't have a great competitive ability, but its special attack and speed are quite nice. It has okay defenses. The only thing that really holds it back is the HP. It's a good offensive typing at Water Psychic, and its move pool is sort of the Gen 1 effect again. It's got really wide stuff. It gets Power Gem, which is one of the few special attackers that actually gets Power Gem. It gets Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Psychic, Surf, Grass Knot, and Dazzling Gleam. So you get a lot of good special coverage. You get Recover, you get Trick. I believe it gets a setup move, but I could be wrong there again. Does not look like it, but I am rushing, so I might miss something there. But it does get some other support type stuff. Like I said, it gets Rapid Spin. You could run a Thunder Wave set, a Confuse Ray set. You've got your options. So I think it's very good, but it's definitely better as a special attacker that's going to be running, say, like Choice Specs or Choice Scarf with 4 offensive moves, I think is the way to go with Starmie. It's good if your team needs speed. That's a big thing that it brings to the table. There's not a lot of stuff at that 115 speed tier. So it'll be able to outspeed a lot of stuff, and there's not too many things that are too much faster than that. Next up we have the 2 Rotoms. We'll do them both at the same time here, because they're going to be on the same page. So, they have identical stats. They're both going to be the same. Good defenses and high special attack with middling speed and low HP. They both have a pretty good typing in Electric Fire and Electric Water. The Electric Fire typing is definitely better offensively. They get the exact same move save for one. Rotom Heat is going to get Overheat. Rotom Wash is going to get Hydro Pump. Excuse me. Levitate helps make sure they don't have a ground weakness, and helps the rest of your team avoid ground moves in general. Rotom Heat's big thing is that it's still weak to rocks, so it's going to take damage from Stealth Rocks. So unless you have a Defog or Rapid Spin user that you bring every time, you might have to run Heavy Duty Boots pretty frequently. Otherwise, it's very nice that you have an offensive threat. Makeda used him very well last season. And now that they pick up Nasty Plot, they're pretty scary special threats that you could run, like Nasty Plot, T-Bolt, Shadow Ball, Overheat, and get some pretty wide coverage on this guy. Rotom Wash, even though it has this exact same stats, I like a little more defensive than Rotom Heat, because it only has one weakness and a couple important resistances to fire and steel. you can run him a little more defensively. You put max points into like HP and defense, and you run a Will-O-Wisp Pain Split set. You can wall some stuff pretty effectively with him, and then you run Volt Switch to help him pivot out, and he improved quite effective. So I think they can be, the nice thing with the Rotoms, they can fit whatever role you want them to. They're good Choice Scarf users thanks to 86 speed. If you invest in HP, they can perform as okay walls, and if you invest them in attack with a Nasty Plot set, they can be sweepers. So they're both good. I gave the slight edge to Rotom Heat, just because he's seen more usage in the meta lately, and his typing's a little better offensively. So after we have Crocodile, and while I've been saying a lot of these things are good Choice Scarfers, I think Crocodile is probably the best Choice Scarf user in A tier. So base 92 speed helps make sure he outspeeds some of the big threats in the tier, like Lucario at base 90. Base 117 attack is very strong, and he gets two great abilities that you can't go wrong with either Intimidate or Moxie. Intimidate helps if you want him to be switching in as a counter to something. Moxie helps if you're running that Choice Scarf set that I talked about. You can bring him in, just click Earthquake on a bunch of stuff, get a couple kills, and every kill Moxie boosts your attack, so it gets stronger and stronger every time you're using it, is the idea. So base 95 HP, pretty respectable defenses, honestly. 70 special, 80 physicals, nothing to scoff at, especially when you have 92 speed and 117 special attack. The big thing Crocodile struggles with is a lot of weaknesses to some pretty common types. Water, Grass, Ice Fighting, and Fairy are all pretty common, and he doesn't have a lot of great resistances, only Poison, Dark Ghost, and Rock being his resistances. So not great on the defensive side, but offensively, Ground and Dark is one of the best offensive types in the game. You can't expect him to take a lot of hits for you, but he should get you a lot of kills. He's got good coverage. He gets Outrage, EQ, Knockoff, Superpower, Stone Edge, Fire Fang, just a lot of good offensive physical moves. And I believe he gets Stealth Rock as well, unless I am mistaken there. He does, yeah. So he can even set that up for you in a pinch. But honestly, I think the way to go with him is going to be Choice Scarf, Choice Band, or run him as like a Swords Dance setup sweeper. That's what Crocodile wants to do, is just get you a lot of kills. Poltegeist. So Poltegeist, despite being involved in, I believe it was one of 2 6-0s last season, is a bit gimmicky. It only really has one thing it wants to do. So stats, it's very good as a wall breaker. It has good special defense, very poor speed in HP. 70 speed is pretty middling, and being just a ghost type, even though it's only weak to dark, a lot of things that didn't get its knockoff last season get knockoff this season, which make it a little tougher on ghost types being around. Abilities wise, they're both okay. Weak armor is more popular just because you want to run Poltegeist as a sweeper. It gets Shell Smash just like Blastoise. The trouble is that its coverage is so poor, it doesn't have an easy time sweeping through teams, so it really gets only Shadow Ball, Giga Drain, I believe Dark Pulse, and Psychic, yeah. So really only 4 good options, which can work against some teams, but it's not as wide as you would like some of your sweepers to be. So it can function if you need a ghost type, but we're starting to get into the things that are fairly situational. That unless you really need a ghost type and something else was taken, I wouldn't suggest picking up Poltegeist unless you plan on trying to pull off a Shell Smash every week with that as your style. Scizor. So I was pretty high on Scizor when I saw he was coming back. I was quite excited because he's been popular for a long time. And I was talking about it with Makeda, that we both thought Scizor was pretty good, but I was saying after my testing he hasn't performed quite as I remembered. Like, it seems like he's fallen off a little bit from what I remember him being in Gen 6. And I think it does hurt him that Megas aren't available. But he's still very usable. Technician boosts any move under, I think it's 60 power, 60 or under. Good stats, gives him 130 attack, combined with Technician makes him pretty threatening. A lot of good resistances. He's actually, you would think, pretty good defensively. The only trouble is his base 70 HP makes it somewhat tough to use him as a wall. Definitely doable, because he does get Roost, so you could. He's traditionally run as a sweeper, though. The idea is that you get a Swords Dance off, and then you are using Bullet Punch, which is Stab Steel, in combination with like probably Bug Bite, Knock Off, those type moves, because you want to be using anything under 60 power to get full advantage of Technician, because it gives it a 1.5 boost. So it sort of boosts up those weaker moves that have cool effects, like Bullet Punch or Bug Bite, like I was talking about. I was going to say he got Dual Wing Beat, which is a big pickup for him, but it's not enough to make him completely viable on his own. He's a lot like Cronnoth, that he wants you to weaken things before he comes in and deals with them, but the trouble is that Steel isn't as good of a type offensively as Water is. So while he can deal with fairies for you, there's not a lot else that's weak to Steel aside from Rock. So Stab Bullet Punch just isn't as good in a draft league setting as it is in some scenarios. So he can function well, but I think he's going to be very situational. Then we got Chansey. Let's see, Chansey. Now Chansey is pretty infamous in Pokemon. This sort of happy little face has made quite a few people very upset throughout the years, and I think you can see why. Base 250 HP is absolutely insane. It makes up for it though with base 5 defenses and attack. So Chansey does not want to get hit by anything physical, especially not a fighting type, being that it's a normal type Pokemon. The main ability you're going to want to run is Natural Cure, because a lot of things are going to want to Toxic this Pokemon. But with that said, good special defense and HP make it be able to tank just about anything special-wise. Even Focus Blast from an Alakazam, this thing is known to take very well. Even a Lucario with Focus Blast, Stab Focus Blast, this thing can take just fine. The trouble is any physical fighting coverage is a big problem, and a lot of physical coverage in general. The HP helps pad for the low defense a little bit, but a lot of things can deal with this easily if you're not careful. That said, it does get access to Eviolite as an item, which boosts its defense and special defense by 1.5. So you're getting 150 base special defense, and you're getting 10 defense. So you get a good boost to your special defense, but still, Eviolite's not going to help that much with your defense. Let me take a quick sip of water here. There we go. So it's very good as a special wall and a cleric. It's not going to do much else for you outside that. It gets a lot of the cleric moves that you want. Heal Bell, it gets Wish, I believe. I could be wrong on Wish. No, just Healing Wish, so no Wish. But it gets Soft Boil to keep itself healthy as a wall, Heal Bell and Aromatherapy to help keep status off the rest of your team. And though it gets offensive moves, if you look at both of its offenses, you don't want to be using most of them. So the classic Chansey set, if you have to run an attack, has always run Seismic Toss. Seismic Toss does damage based off your level. It's going to do 50 damage every time you use it, no matter what. So you get consistent damage that way. It can use Toxic to help get damage if you need to do it that way as well. And if you really want to get cheeky, it does know Metronome, and you can pull out some funny moves with Metronome. If you don't know what Metronome does, it just picks any random move off of every possible move list. So you can get some interesting things that way. But yeah, Chansey, definitely not offensive, but one of the best special walls out there. Only really suffers because of its base defense and no offensive stats whatsoever. Next up we have Reuniclus, and honestly I was surprised I ranked Reuniclus as low as I did, because it's a solid Pokemon. It gets Regenerator and Magic Guard, which are both very good abilities, and even Overcoat, which isn't bad itself. The trouble is its stats, while they're good, it's tough to use it properly unless you have a team that's really built around Reuniclus's gimmick. So 110 HP is really good, especially since you have Regenerator. 125 special attack is strong, and special defense and defense aren't bad. With Psychic type, there's not a lot of things you're weak to, but not a lot of things you resist either. Its biggest downside is 30 speed. Now, there's a reason for this. It's meant to be run in Trick Room. For those of you that don't know, Trick Room switches the speed order, so how it's usually the faster Pokemon goes first, Trick Room makes it so that the slower Pokemon goes first. So if that's the case and you set up Trick Room, Reuniclus is very effective because it goes first thanks to its slow speed, and it can get a lot of kills thanks to its good attack. But Trick Room is really hard to pull off in singles. Trick Room only lasts 5 turns, and the turn you use it counts as one, so you really only get 4 turns of Trick Room. And then, say your Reuniclus dies, if the rest of your team isn't slow as well, then you're going to be in trouble because you might have something like a Cinderace that's usually going to go first. Well, now in Trick Room, Cinderace is really slow, and it doesn't want to be taking those hits like a Reuniclus might. So, unless you build a team with Trick Room in mind, which is possible, I would say Reuniclus is a tough thing to make work. It's got good moves. It gets a lot of special coverage. I believe it's like Thunderbolt. It gets Psychic coverage, Shadow Ball, Energy Ball, and I think it gets Fairy. Just Charm. Yeah, just Charm. So no Fairy. But it still gets good special coverage. It gets set up in Calm Mind Substitute. It gets Regenerator, Magic Guard. So it's a good Pokemon. But unless you're committed to running a Trick Room team, I wouldn't consider it unless it's sort of a last resort, like, oh, I really need a Psychic type, and stuff like Alakazam already got picked. Next we have Bisharp. Bisharp is similar, that I'm surprised I put it as low as I did, but he does have his problems. So he's got a very good typing in Dark Steel. As you can see, he resists and is immune to quite a few things. But like Lucario, he has weaknesses to some of the most common offensive typings in Fire, Fighting, and Ground. He has good abilities. Defiant, Inner Focus, and Pressure are all usable, but Defiant is the most common. When any of Bisharp's stats get lowered by an opponent, it raises his attack by 2 stages. So it's very helpful if you want to run a Sweeper Bisharp, and base 125 makes it very threatening if he gets a Defiant boost. But unfortunately, other than defense and attack, he doesn't really have any standout stats. 65 HP isn't great, 70 speed is pretty average this generation, 70 special defense isn't bad, but it's definitely not good, and his special attack isn't anything special either. So his highest stat, his attack, isn't even that high, all things considered. We've seen other stuff in A tier, like Rillaboom with that sort of attack stat that had better stats overall. So a little lackluster in the stats department. And then coverage is kind of where he really starts to fall apart. He gets Knockoff, Sucker Punch, Iron Head are his biggest draws. And then he gets X-Scissor, Poison Jab. He gets a few rock moves, but that's about it. He gets some fighting coverage, but nothing major. Nothing that you really want something like this to have. He doesn't get his Earthquake or some of the other big spammable physical moves. He does get Stealth Rock for support. He gets Taunt if you want to run him with Taunt. And a Swords Dance, Sucker Punch, Bisharp is nothing to scoff at, but it can be tough to pull off thanks to his low base HP. So he's definitely solid, but he's a lot like Crononth, that he's going to require some help from the rest of your team weakening things, and then he can come in and start Sucker Punching things to finish up a game. Next we have Hippowdon, and Hippowdon is definitely better than where I have him ranked, but Hippowdon should not be used unless you plan on using a sand team. The reason being, where we go? There we go. The reason being, he only has sand-based abilities, and one of them sets up Sandstorm. Now, that's not the end of the world, and you can pull him off on non-sand-based teams, but the way Sandstorm works is anything that is not Ground, Steel, or Rock takes damage every turn. So, say you pair him up with another wall like Milotic, right? Because he would cover Milotic's electric weakness, you think they might work well together. Well, now Milotic is going to be taking damage and negating its leftovers every time it has to switch in after Hippowdon because the sand is going to do damage to it. And that's the same if you had a Sweeper. Say you had your, what would be a good example? Your Cinderace as your S tier. Then it wouldn't be able to perform quite as effectively in sand because it's going to be taking damage every turn. So on a sand team that's meant for it, with an Excadrill as your S tier, or with another Sandstream user like, or not Sandstream, Sandburst user like Stoutland or something along those lines, it's very good because it supports those Pokemon quite effectively. But otherwise, Sandstream kind of hurts you, and you don't want to be running Sand Force because you don't want to set up Sandstorm anyways, so it's tricky to do. So its stats are good. Typing, normal ground, very good. 112 attack on a wall Pokemon with 108 HP, 118 defense is very nice. Speed is kind of slow. Hippowdon is sort of a defensive staple. You can run Earthquake, Whirlwind, Stealth Rock, Toxic, or Slack Off in the last slot, and he'll be able to sit there and be very annoying. But like I said, I wouldn't recommend drafting Hippowdon unless you're planning on committing to a Sand team. And even then, there's other Sandstream users you could draft, but I think Hippowdon's definitely good, and you can make him work outside of it. You just need to know what you're getting into, that your other stuff is going to be taking the chip damage from Sandstorm every turn. Starmie? Didn't we already do Starmie? No, I lost my place. That's what it was. I was going to say, wait a minute. Vaporeon, that's better. Vaporeon. So Makeda informed me that I might be a little biased in the way I had described it, but I do think that Vaporeon is the best water absorber in the draft league currently. It didn't have some of its moves that it really wanted last season, and it gets them back now. So if you look at its stats, 110 base special attack, 95 base special defense, 130 HP. It's a lot like Milotic stats-wise. Water Absorb makes it immune to water, and it gets healed for 25% every time it takes water damage. And it's only weak to 2 things. It's a very strong wall. I can test personally. I drafted it last season as my Water Absorber, and it did very well for me. If we go down to moves, somewhat shallow offensively, getting really only Water, Ice, Ghost, and Normal. But it gets a good support move pool in Wish, Baton Pass, Acid Armor, Toxic, Yawn. It's got a lot of things that help make it annoying for an enemy team to deal with. And like I said, it gets its big 2 in Heal Bell, Toxic back this generation. So Toxic helps cripple other walls that try to deal with it. And now it even picked up Flip Turn. While not probably going to be run that frequently, it is possible with 65 attack. So if you need a Water Absorber and you see someone picked up Dracovish, and a lot of the other stuff up here has already been taken, you want a water type, I would suggest take a look at Vaporeon. Next up we have Duraludon. Also available as a Gmax if you really have your heart set on Duraludon and it gets taken as an A tier before a Gmax for whatever reason. Now Duraludon is interesting. It's got a lot of good resistances, but like a lot of steel types, it's got a problem with ground and fighting, which are 2 of the most common offensive types. And it's got okay stats with 120 special attack, 115 defense, 95 attack. 85 speed is pretty good, 70 HP is okay. 50 special defense is really bad though. It's either forced into running Assault Vest, otherwise it doesn't want to take special hits at all. Anything that gets Focus Blast or Earth Power is going to give this thing a real hard time, and its abilities are pretty lackluster. Light Metal and Heavy Metal are okay if you want to be using like Heavy Slam or you're worried about a low kick, but even Stalwart isn't that useful outside of doubles, so you're probably going to be running Light Metal most of the time, which only really dodges low kick somewhat. So yeah, nothing great in the ability department there. Typing is interesting, but you kind of, yes, you get 2 good typings together, but you kind of miss out on some of the things that are good about both of them. The fact that you're a dragon type gets rid of the resistance steel would have to dragon and fairy, and because you have the steel type as a stab, you're kind of pigeonholed into not having great coverage. You only get Thunderbolt, Dragon Pulse, or Draco Meteor, Dark Pulse, and that's it. That's all you get special wise. So it's tough to play him correctly, but he can be strong. I've seen him used quite well. Don't get me wrong, a physical one is possible, like a Dragon Dance set, but he's definitely geared more towards the special side of things, I think. So he's good if you need a Dragon type, but I think there's other better ones out there, even in B tier, that'll perform well for you. Next up we have Diggersby. Now Diggersby is, I kind of called him Baby Azumarill. He's really similar. He has huge power and about the same attack stat, but he has less HP, and he's a little faster. So he's got normal ground as a type, which is okay. Weak to fighting, ice, grass, and water, which are all pretty common. If you aren't running huge power, you're going to have a really hard time with his attack stat. Though Cheek Pouch can be interesting in some situations, it's tricky to use. And his coverage is okay. You've got Earthquake and I forget, I think it's Body Slam. Oh, the return is gone. Let's see. Body Slam. Does he get Headbutt? Yeah. Well, no. Okay, so Body Slam is going to be your main normal coverage. Earthquake is going to be your main ground coverage, but he also gets Quick Attack. So he's similar to Azumarill that he can use Stab Priority to help make up for his low speed. He gets the 3 punches, he gets some fighting coverage, I think he gets Superpower too. Yeah, Superpower. And then he gets some other stuff in Gunk Shot, Iron Head, Stone Edge, so he's got pretty good coverage. The only trouble is the stats, even with huge power, are just okay. Nothing outstanding. So he's pretty middling. If you wanted an A-tier ground type, and some of the others got taken, he's available, but I don't think he's anything special. Draco Zolt. Now, Dracozolt is interesting. I have him ranked pretty low, as you can see, but I think he has potential to be higher. It just depends on how lucky you are. Because he's very similar to Dracovish. He gets a move called Bolt Beak. Let's see, Bolt Beak, which is the same thing as Vicious Rend. It's electric type stab. It does double damage if you move before the other Pokemon. Now, he's got good speed, 75, so you can choice Scarf him and he can outspeed a lot of things. But instead of getting Strong Jaw to help with his damage, he gets Hustle. Gives you an attack boost, but it lowers the accuracy of all your moves. So that's why I say if you're feeling lucky, he can perform better than where I have him ranked. He can really do a lot of work with Hustle. I've seen it happen in a couple of YouTube videos. But the trouble is you're going to have those really high highs where you just go and you get 3 kills in a row with Bolt Beak. And then you're going to have those low lows where you miss 3 Bolt Beaks in a row because of Hustle. So it's sort of a trade-off. And if you're willing to put up with the ability that you're missing some of your moves, you can get some good sort of like peaks out of him that he's going to be able to get kills pretty consistently when you're hitting. The trouble is that you have to hit. Otherwise, he's Electric Dragon, which is a really good typing. Offensively, lets him hit a lot of stuff, and he's got pretty respectable coverage. He gets his dragon, he gets his electric, he gets some ground coverage in there, and a little bit of interesting flying shenanigans there, but nothing too crazy. So I would say, like I said, if you're feeling lucky, he's the way to go. Oh, you know what I just noticed? I forgot Incineroar. Let's do him real quick. I think Incineroar is interesting. He's one of the better slow pivots, and he's got some pretty good stats. I would probably say Incineroar is up in this area towards Crawdaunt and Alakazam. We'll throw him right in the middle there, real quick. Incineroar. There we go. So he's got some pretty good stats across the board. Speed is slow. He's probably the best example of a slow pivot. He gets Intimidate, which you should be running every time over Blaze. It's really good on him. With his base 90 defense, 95 HP, you switch him in on a physical threat with Intimidate, even on an Earthquake, and he might be able to take it for you. But he's able to just deal with a lot of things quite well. He's got Stab Knockoff, he's got Stab Flare Blitz, he gets U-Turn, he gets, I believe, Earthquake. Yeah, Earthquake. He gets some fighting coverage in there. I think it's Drain Punch? No, Close Combat. Oh, wow, I didn't realize he got Close Combat. Yeah, excuse me, definitely pretty strong. Even Outrage, what the hell? I might need to move him up a little on the list. I'll have to take a look more after this, but definitely very good. He gets good stab coverage, like I said, a slow pivot. So the idea behind that, you switch him in with Intimidate, he's able to take some moves with his good defensive stats and then use his slow speed to U-turn out and bring in something like a Gengar or an Alakazam or a Crawdaunt that doesn't want to take hits but wants to do a lot of damage. So definitely a good fire type if you're looking for one. And Fire Dark is definitely good offensive typing. Oh, there we go. Incineroar. Okay. Where did we leave off? Wheezing. Wheezing. I want to like Wheezing, but I don't know. He just seems pretty underwhelming. The stats are really good on the defensive side. Special defense is a little lackluster, low HP. Okay attack. Unfortunately, he gets a lot better special coverage, so it'd be nice if these were switched. And the tough thing, I don't know, it feels like he's so good abilities-wise, he's just cursed that you have to pick one. He's got 3 amazing ones. He's got Misty Surge, Neutralizing Gas, and Levitate, which are all really solid. But you're almost pigeonholed into taking Levitate, because if you don't, he's going to get hit by ground, which is a big problem for him. Granted, he does have good defense, but something with an Earth Power can give him a hard time. So you're almost pigeonholed into Levitate, even though you want to be using the other 2 sometimes as well. It's tough, because he's got a good typing. Poison Fairy is good that he can switch in on a fairy type and threaten other fairy types out. But he's still walled by steel pretty hard is the thing. So I don't know. You can look at his moves. He's got really good special coverage. He gets like Dark Pulse, Sludge Bomb, Strange Steam, Shadow Ball, Flamethrower, Thunderbolt. I think that's everything. Yeah, good special coverage. Gets Will-O-Wisp to help him stay nice and bulky on the physical side. His biggest problem is that he wants to be a wall but doesn't have reliable recovery. He gets, I think it's Pain Split. Yeah, Pain Split. But that only works for a little bit before things start to go south for both you and the opponent at the same time. So he's good. I don't think he's one of the better fairies, though. If the others like Togekiss, Sylveon, Mimikyu are still available and you want a fairy type, I would suggest one of those over him. But he's definitely not bad. Now, Kingdra is a lot like Hippowdon. He's ranked low, but that's only because he has some weather-related problems. Now, the big thing with Kingdra is that he's an A tier, and the only rain setters in the game are also A tiers, so if you draft Kingdra, you would have to be running Rain Dance as a move on something. And he's got nice stats across the board, nice and balanced. You can run him physical or special. He's got okay abilities. You can run him Sniper instead of a Swift Swim set, but Swift Swim is definitely his stronger set. Water Dragon, just like Draco Vision, is an amazing typing. You're only weak to Dragon Fairy. You get rid of Electric and Grass as your weaknesses. You get rid of Ice thanks to Water, so it's really good defensive typing. A little low HP and okay speed, kind of make him about average there. Coverage-wise, he's decent. Hurricane, Draco Meteor, Scald, Ice Beam. I don't think he gets anything else particularly outstanding, special coverage-wise, but physical, about the same sort of stuff. He gets DD, I think. Yeah, Dragon Dance. Oh, I guess he gets Flash Cannon, Iron Head, which is nice for the fairies. But yeah, middling stuff, and if you are committed to setting up Rain, like there's a couple of G-Maxes like Lapras that can do it, then he's okay. But unless you have a way to proc Swift Swim reliably, I don't think he's that good. And then we get into the Rain setters. Politoed is, let's see, come on, Politoed. Politoed is strong. It's got very good stats and a good spread that helps it be somewhat defensive and still have offensive stats like Melodic, like Vaporeon. It's interesting in that it gets Water Absorb and Drizzle, so you could interchange them depending on what you need. The only trouble is that if you run a weather team, it's like Hippowdon that you kind of have to commit. Because if you wanted to run a fire type on a rain team, its damage gets cut in half whenever the rain is up, so it's a bit of a problem for some of the team, but if you work around it, it has some good potential. Politoed gets some pretty good coverage. It's like I said, some of the early Pokemon kind of pick up better moves as they go along. You've got all your water coverage in Hydro Pump, Surf, Scald. You've got your Earth Power, your Ice Beam. I believe it gets Psychic. Yes, it gets Psychic. It gets Focus Blast as well. So it's very useful. I think it's better in doubles, and I think it would be better if a lot more rain options were available with it. Like if we had 2 A tiers, it would be a lot stronger. But as things sit, you're going to have to build around it with your B tiers and your S tiers in order for it to get its most value. And it can be easy to counter if people are able to deal with rain. Something like a Ferrothorn might give you trouble if you have a rain team. So we've got here Pelipper, another rain setter, slightly ranked behind Politoed. I think if you're drafting a rain setter, Politoed is the way to go. Pelipper has a lot lower stats, good defense and special attack, but everything else is pretty just meh. 4 times weak to electric, which is pretty common. Hollow Kid and I had been joking about Cinderace being able to one-shot this thing now that it has Libero and Electro Ball, so it gets killed by a lot of stuff that has special electric coverage. Drizzle's a nice ability to have on it with a pretty good typing in Water Flying. It is a slow pivot that gets U-turn, Ice Beam, Surf, Hurricane being its main 3 moves that it has, but it does get access to knockoff now that we're allowing home moves again, so it can be interesting, but it's definitely the worst of the 2 rain setters. If for whatever reason there's 2 rain teams being drafted and someone takes Politoed, it's an acceptable one, but I would definitely not pick it up otherwise. And last we have Corsola G. Now, at the start of last season, this thing was pretty hyped up as the next Ferrothorn or Toxapex, but it didn't really live up to that. The big thing is it's base 100 in defenses, and it can get Eviolite, so it's really base 150 in each defense. The trouble last season was knockoff, and last season not that many things got knockoff. Now things do. So it's going to have a really hard time keeping its Eviolite and not getting destroyed by something like a Crocodile that's going to be able to take advantage of it pretty easily. Outside of that, if you're able to play around knockoff, say you have a justified user on your team that wants to take knockoffs for it, it gets very solid defensive moves. It gets Will-O-Wisp, Stealth Rocks, it gets Strength Sap, and then it's got okay coverage in Shadow Ball and Scald, those sort of things to use. So it's not bad by any means, but out of all the walls, it's going to have the hardest time of performing up to expectations because a lot of its stats just aren't good outside of its defenses. So, especially with its Eviolite knocked off, it's pretty lackluster. So, I think Ghost types are just better offensively most of the time, to be honest. So, that is the tier list. Like I said, this isn't something that you should be like, oh, I have my A tier pick, I need to take Volcarona first. Like, if you have a team that Volcarona doesn't work on, don't draft it just because I put Volcarona at number 1. This is just to give you an idea of what's better and what's not quite as good, what should be taken versus what shouldn't. Keep in mind, there's only 14 of us in the draft league, so really only this many Pokemon are going to get taken off of the list. And there's going to be a bunch that are available as free agents later on. So if you need to switch, you can. Like I said, though, the main thing you should be looking at with an A tier is synergy with your S and G Max. You want it to be filling out your Fairy Dragon Steel core. You want it to be shoring up a weakness the other 2 might have. This tier list is really just there to give you an idea of what is a good A tier versus what is a slightly worse A tier. None of these are bad. They're, like I said, they're just going to require you to set up or play around them a little more than these, which can fit into most teams without too much adjustment. So thank you for sticking around for this long. I know it was a long video and rambly and not entirely on plan, but thank you for sticking around this long if you made it here, and I hope this helped you.